Welcome to Experience Means Business, a podcast by Adobe Professional Services.
Hi, Ray. How are you?
Hey, Marion. I'm doing fine. How are you doing?
Good. I'm glad we're doing this podcast together. How about you? You're excited?
Same here. I'm really excited, really stoked to do this together. So it's really good to see you again.
Yeah. You and I have been talking about marketplaces for quite some time. And so I think it's exciting that we get to do a podcast specifically aimed at B2B and marketplaces, right?
Yeah, it is. It's really looking good picking this up.
So let's start perhaps with some quick introductions. Why don't you kick off? Who are you?
Thank you. Well, that's a good question. Then let's keep it short. My name is Ray Bogman, based out of the Netherlands, currently responsible as a senior global software support manager, overseeing the customer engineering team within Adobe.
Nice. I like it.
Yeah. Tell me something about you.
Yeah, my name is Marion Freijsen. I'm based out of the Netherlands as well, which is a coincidence, really, since you and I travel around quite a bit. But my role is as a customer experience architect, and I advise customers and clients on many different things around the Adobe Commerce solution, including marketplaces. And that's a question I've had from so many customers over the last few years. What are marketplaces? Should we participate or not? And hopefully during the podcast today, Ray and I will be able to answer some of those questions. So Ray, perhaps a good way to get this started is for us to define what we mean when we talk about marketplaces. Do you want to give that a go?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question because there's a lot of, well, I wouldn't say definitions around marketplaces, but looking at the overall aspect of a marketplace is, of course, having an organization, company supporting either a single or multiple products and selling that online, either throughout a single channel or throughout multiple channels.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'd like to also take it back to what is a marketplace, right? We all know markets, the old-fashioned type, where you can move from stall to stall. You buy your lettuce, you buy your breads, you buy your meats, perhaps, or cheese, and you move around this one place and you buy all the products that you want. And effectively, that's really what we're talking about when we're talking about B2B marketplaces too. You just go to one place where you can buy multiple different products, correct?
One stop to shop it all, I would say. And I think that's the easiest convenience way we are looking at it from a modern perspective. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, and as I said, you and I have talked about it a lot. We even did a little white paper on it. But let's start by perhaps looking at some of the big marketplaces that are out there. Everybody knows eBay, Alibaba, Amazon, of course. Let's not forget Amazon. And the question a lot of companies have is, should I participate in one of these external marketplaces, or is there something about creating one for myself? So any views you'd like to share?
Well, I think it's a really good question that you pop up with. And I think before being involved in this, I was being an architect, of course. With that, I've received many questions around that. And the interesting thing that always came to mind, expressing that back, is what are your intentions? Where is your market? And from that point of view, sometimes it makes sense to participate in a program like eBay, because your business users there are available at that space. But sometimes it's important to have your own, I would say, set of tools, making sure that you reach those. So it really depends, I guess, on the use case.
Yeah, so you're saying effectively that a company should sit down and really understand who they want to reach, who the audience would be that they reach through a marketplace, or if they can reach them another way. I like to turn that around. And since I deal with B2C companies as well as B2B companies, I think it's always you serve your clients where they want you to be, right? And just as anecdotal evidence, when I was running an e-commerce company in the Netherlands. I was the COO of an e-commerce company. We got the question, do you want to participate in a local marketplace? And my initial thought was, why would I want to do that? That's where my competition is as well. So why would I put myself in a place where I have to compete for my customers' attention rather than have them come to my website? But in the end, and I think that gives a little bit of a direction to this conversation also, in the end, I decided, no, I have to be where my customers want me to be. If they choose to go to a marketplace to buy goods from me and potentially from competitors as well, that's where I should be. But,
maybe to allude that, give a little bit more color to, I would say, the discussion is, I think it depends. It could be maybe that in phase one, true. I mean, you need to join and make sure you have visibility and build that particular brand. But maybe over time, if there's enough brand to be built and they will find you all on, it will have an impact, of course, on the margins. So I guess you always need to be aware on marketplaces on how to set across all those products that you have in either supporting those channels or building a dedicated brand for yourself as well, being there.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that. It's a really good point, because ultimately, and I'm a strong believer in strategy, but ultimately it's all about strategic thinking. Where is your audience? How do you serve them best? Where do they want you to be? And like you said, it isn't a static environment. It's a very dynamic environment. And I think marketplaces have a great future, and we're building a lot of these right now for different customers. And we're building different types. So what I'd like to move to next is really a part, I can talk about strategy all day. So don't ask me too many questions. Certainly, I think apart from having to think about what strategy you employ to develop your audience and move them perhaps from your site to a marketplace or from a marketplace back to a site, it's also about the architecture, right? So let's talk a little bit about that, because we did some work on this in the past. We created 16 different architecture types that you could have for marketplaces. And I know the audience will go, like, what? How do I choose what marketplace is the right one for me? And that's what we were trying to help with. So walk me through the 4 key questions that we had in the end. We distilled it down to 4 simple questions on how to define the architecture that's right for your company. So walk me through those 4 questions, please.
Yeah, and I think making sure that it's realistic enough, those 4 questions then mainly relate to, where are we from a marketing perspective? And the first one really relates to the data stream. So how many streams of data, products, SKUs will appear from different, vendors? And the second one is...
Sorry, Ray, just one quick question. So do you mean catalogs, or do you actually mean products? How many products or how many catalogs?
Well, no, this is SKUs. So how many different SKUs and data streams? So I can have, let me give an example maybe to really allude a little bit. If I have multiple vendors coming into my marketplace, and with those vendors, everybody's delivering a different, I would say, list of SKUs that can be sold within my marketplace. I can have maybe, a single list, but I can have multiple as well. If you look at the eBay, they have multiple data sources coming in. Some are manual, some are automatic. So based on that, keeping it simple or keeping it really
voluminous.
That's a nice word, by the way. So I would say that's definitely layer 1, the data stream. How many data sources do I get building that? And with that, going into the second phase, and that more or less relates to your catalog reference, is the e-commerce layer. Do I have within Adobe Commerce, let's say, one website? Or do I have multiple websites, multiple store views, multiple catalogs that can offer all of those different data sets? Again, the data source, that's level 1. Then the second level is the e-commerce system. And on top of that, it's layer 3, to keep it really simple, the payment service providers. It sounds a little bit off, but actually, if you look at it and have those different catalogs, going into those different regions, the payment service provider actually depends on within my market, where do I use which component do I need to have, making sure that there's an official transitioning happening. And
so really, hang on. You're going so fast, but there's so much information here that I would like to touch on. But so payment providers is interesting, right? Because I know that people will think, well, I only have perhaps PayPal or I use credit card, but think about different countries, right? If you do marketplace as well and you serve different countries, sometimes you have a different payment provider because the country demands that. That's what you're talking about, correct?
Well, yes or no. And actually, and I'm sorry for going that quickly, because I just initially wanted to explain the key questions and then go a little bit more deeper on the specifics of them. That particular payment component, as you just mentioned, refers to country specifics, of course. But actually, if you go a little bit deeper and definitely going into the B2B reference, within B2B, we sometimes don't have a payment gateway as of is. Because let's face it, punch out, that's a really solid component. So looking at the payment in general and getting back to the B2B discussion that we are having in this podcast, we need to make sure that the payment component is a general component. Is it a money order? Is it punch out? Is it, let's say, PayPal? Is it whatever local currency I'm selling out and transacting in? So it's really more a broader thing. Than just, the PayPals that we just...
This was, yeah. Good point. Yeah, thank you. And number 4, you were going to get to...
Number 4, and that's the interesting one that everybody looks into, is the shipping part. Because we can have, data streams, e-commerce systems, payment gateways, but at the end, it's all about distribution. And what we're seeing is that the smaller ones that have just one warehouse where they ship this from, which is pretty straightforward. But you can imagine we already touched base on the eBays, the Amazon of this world. They will have multiple data warehouses across the globe, maybe even hubs.
Yes, exactly.
And having that layer in place. So that's why we wanted to keep it really simple, have those 4 layers. The 4th layer is really, sending it out, the whole warehousing.
Yeah. So one example that I know both you and me like is Frankfurt Airport, right?
Oh yeah, I love that.
Because nobody thinks of an airport or Frankfurt Airport as being a marketplace, but explain it a little bit.
Well, interesting thing is, and this goes back even to the earlier days when it was even called Magento Enterprise back then. Now it's called Adobe Commerce, as we relate to. But looking at an airport, what we see is that, well, let's assume you bought a ticket, you want to go on a business trip or personal trip, and you need to buy something. Let's say you want to have a bottle of wine, to bring back as a gift to your spouse. And there are multiple options. Actually, all those single points, there are just small businesses, and they're connected.
You mean the retail stores at the airport?
The retail stores. Thank you very much. They're all connected within this currently Adobe Commerce environment. So they have an online and an offline presence. And actually, when making sure, for buying those gifts or other goods that you have in mind, that transaction component actually is a full marketplace that created. So if you go to Frankfurt Airport, the entire organization is built from those singular retailers within the airport, connecting together with one Adobe Commerce system.
Yeah, and I like this example because I always, you and I are business travelers. We know what it's like. You're rushing from Terminal A to Terminal C. And you don't have time to go in and out of the retail stores. But if you can use the online catalog and say, hey, Mr. Frankfurt Airport, I'm going to be at Terminal C in a minute, and I'd like to take that bottle or perhaps a bottle of perfume or something, pick up something I needed delivered to my gate. And they're actually there, right? When you arrive at that gate, hand you your package and off you go. That's fabulous. I mean, I think that's everything a marketplace should be. It's a seamless very user-friendly experience that allows me as the user the option of how I want to transact and what I want to buy when.
Yeah, you're fully correct on that. And I think it's a modern way of using those marketplace components. True, there are still traditional elements to it, but this is a modern way on how you can use offline and combining it all together within an online experience.
So if we translate that to the B2B world, I know that in B2B, marketplaces are slightly different. Now you're not selling to that consumer, that traveler that's running from A to B, but you're selling, if you're in renewable energy, you might want to sell spare parts, where and you want to create a market where you can actually buy and sell spare parts, right? So how much autonomy should you give your sellers, for instance, in a marketplace? And why is that important to how I run my marketplaces?
Well, I guess it depends on the brand. I mean, we've seen many out there, of course, over the years. And definitely if throughout the B2B, there's always, authorization, login component.
And
based on
very important.
It was very important one, definitely on B2B. And based on that autonomy, it depends on what kind of access, what kind of prices do I see, how much revenue, what kind of special prices are being made over the years. So I guess it really depends on what kind of organizations. The bigger ones, they have a different autonomy than the smaller ones. I know it sounds a little bit, vague, but if you look at some of the specifics and the ones that we've seen, the flexibility actually within the Adobe Commerce system has the flexibility to start small and grow big and get all those benefits with that.
Yeah, I like that. It's always a good idea to kind of dip your toe in the water, test it out, devise those strategies, back to strategy again, but, make sure your strategy around both protecting your brand and at the same time opening up to a marketplace environment. That's really key. And I'd like to talk also a little bit about the difference between horizontal and vertical marketplaces, because I think, again, in the B2B space, it's important that you consider that as well. Vertical being, I'm only going to sell one type of product within one industry, or horizontal being, I'm going to allow other types of products that are complementary perhaps to my product for them to sell via my marketplace as well. Do you have a view on how that changes the architecture?
Well, I think it's a really good example that you give. And let me give a small one that I've seen over the last couple of years. Sometimes it's pretty easy, of course, to start with one and have actually the vertical one. But since that really benefits the organization and we're flexible enough to adapt, let's say, an additional data source, in a data source in the system, opening up a new website, which has the ability, of course, within the system, and adding those payment service providers or shipping component, it was really flexible to see a horizontal drift, maybe not hundreds at one, but the flexibility to create that and have, I think I've seen one with actually 500 stores at some point.
Wow, was amazing.
Pharmaceutical. So you can imagine there are multiple ways to grow that. I would say back to the strategy component, as you mentioned, start with a good vision, the strategy, and build within. But also make sure that it's scalable because, at some point getting the data, but also the architecture from a technical perspective, that needs to be supported as well. Definitely if we go globally. So always be aware on the full scalability. We have enough resources internally that can support or help you with that.
Yeah, I was going to say we have expertise at Adobe Consulting Services for sure that can help not only think through the initial stages, what is the right approach for your business, what is, what fits, where do you want to start, how do you want to scale this, over what time do you want to do that, what are the expectations, all of that we can definitely help with. And, Ray, it's great always talking to you about these sort of topics because I know you're as passionate as I am about making sure that what we deliver to customers is not just the technology, but it's that expertise, that layer around it that really helps drive businesses to success. So thank you so much for spending your time with me again today. And
my pleasure.
Really looking forward to a next conversation. In ending the podcast here, is there anything else you would like to add before we close out?
One more thing, and this is definitely something that we've seen across. Besides B2B, we tend to see a lot of things that are happening into the B2B2C world. So always keep a good eye, and maybe it's a discussion for next time, because there's so much more opportunities to see. I would say we can do a dedicated podcast on that as well.
I think we have many more podcasts that we could potentially do.
We could.
Thank you so much again.
Thank you, Marion.
Yeah, we're looking forward to the next one, right?
Thank you, Marion. Have a great day.
Thanks. Bye, Ray.
Bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Let us know what you think by writing to us at infoacs@adobe.com. See you later for more.